We are continuing our series in the upper room, and before we get to the upper room, I want to take you back about 3,500 years ago. Children of Israel were slaves in Egypt, and God decided to remove the children of Israel from Egyptian bondage and bring them to a promised land. And within this promised land, they were supposed to be the people for God's glory. They were supposed to be a people who honored God, who loved God and respected God. And as a matter of fact, not only were they supposed to honor God, love God, and respect God, but their example was supposed to spread throughout the world so that people could see them and see the glory of God. And that the world would come to know God through their behavior. And so if that was going to happen, what God had to do is, as he brought them out of bondage and before he took them into the land, he took Moses and he brought him up on top of a mountain, Mount Sinai, and he gave to him a law. Now, the law is oftentimes boiled down to 10 commandments that were written on a stone, but you probably know the law was much more than just those 10 commandments. And then Moses came down, and God and Israel entered into a covenant. The idea is that Israel would obey the command of God. They would obey the law. God had given them the law that was supposed to direct the people, be the guiding principle of the people as they lived within the land. And then God would protect them in the land. And God would be their source of prosperity, their source of deliverance, their source of safety. That they would obey God's command, and God would allow them to live long and prosperous in the land. Now, you might be aware, I'm sure you all are, that they broke the covenant. I mean, constantly, immediately. I mean, they continually rejected the command of God. They continually rejected the law of God. And so, about 800 years after going into their promised land, roughly, they went into captivity. Jeremiah said this. Jeremiah 31, starting in verse 31, "Behold, the days are coming, declares the Lord, when I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and the house of Judah. Not like the covenant that I made with their fathers on the day I took them by the hand to bring them out of the land of Egypt. My covenant, which they broke, though I was a husband to them, declares the Lord." I was their husband, declares the Lord. So what happened was God made a covenant with them. You will obey my law, you will keep my command, and I will allow you to live within this land. They broke the covenant, they were removed from the land, and God says, don't worry, God's gonna give you a new one. I'll make a new covenant. But what's interesting is that he says this new covenant, it's not like the covenant that I made with their fathers. It's a different type of covenant. And I think that is important to note. I think sometimes we think the covenant is like the other one. It's just different rules. You know, like it's the same type of covenant, just the law is different. But God says, no, it's not just a different law, of a different legal system. It's a completely different type of covenant. And so we ask, well, what's this new type of covenant like? And I'm glad you asked, because Jeremiah actually continued, right? He says, "For this is the covenant that I will make with the house of Israel after those days, declares the Lord. I will put my law within them, and I will write it on their heart. And I will be their God, and they shall be my people, and no longer shall each man teach his brother, saying, know the Lord, for they all shall know me, from the least of them to the greatest of them, declares the Lord. For I will forgive their iniquity, and I will remember their sin no more. Okay, so there's a lot in that we could talk about that we don't have time to talk about. But what's fascinating to me, and I think that we should think about for a moment, is that this type of covenant is different. And he says it's not like the former, and as he explains what this new covenant is like, it has a lot to do with where it's written. So Moses went up on a mountain, and he got these stones. And you remember, there's a whole situation where he goes down and he breaks the stones, and so he needs new stones, and so they write it down on these tablets of stone. It says written out, long, detailed thing. And God says this new covenant is not going to be like that. I'm not going to write it on tablets of stone. I'm going to write it on their heart. In some way, it's a more internal covenant. I'll put my law within them. There's a lot to think about when we consider that. And we don't have time to talk about it all, but I want us to carry that thought with us into the upper room. So Jesus, in a very similar type of a way, is creating a people. And these people are supposed to be to the glory of God. Israel was supposed to be, but there was this break in covenant. They failed. And so Jesus says, this is us. It's now our response. It's what we do. They will be my people. They will be the ones who honor me and glorify me. And they will be the ones that are the people that are supposed to be like what the rest of the world sees because of the way that they live and because of the way that they show the glory and the splendor and the majesty of God, that our actions and our behavior is supposed to be something that quite frankly changes the world. The people God has created supposed to change the world. I think as we look at world history, to some degree we can see how that has happened and is happening. But what's interesting is that, kind of like promised, having given the charge, they don't all come out with stone tablets. You know? Interesting. Jesus doesn't even give them the New Testament. There's no New Testament at this point. The people of God are started not with a written document. I mean, that will come later, and we could talk about that, but it's a command. In a lot of ways, it's a command of the heart. A new commandment I give you, is what Jesus said. Right? It's not like the old one. Well, in some ways. But a new commandment I give you. That you love one another. As I have loved you, you must love one another. By this, all people will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another. It's like the command. It's almost as if you could boil the law down to a single command. That's what God's wanted. Now, don't make a mistake about it. God has always wanted that. But there's something new about it. And we'll talk about that, but it is a command to love. And here's the problem we have, and I feel the weight of the problem, even as I speak it, is that when you speak about like the command of Christianity, that the law we've been given, right? The command. As a matter of fact, throughout the New Testament, there's going to be just a few times where we read about the terminology, the law of Christ. And every time you read that terminology, it's relating to the love command. Like that's his law, that's his command, that's his rule. And what happens is we feel this burden because we feel like we know that there's more, right? I mean, there's ethical commands that we have to follow, and there's other things that the Bible talks about. And so we want to make the law more. We want to make the command more. And so like there's this burden. And I want to talk just briefly about that before we get to the passage, because I think what's happened is there's become some misconceptions about what love is. As a matter of fact, we'll talk about it more in a moment. I almost hesitate to even use the word love. I think we all know Jesus never used the word love as far as like L-O-V-E, love. Like that's an English word. He used the word agape. And the English word love has been so watered down. Like we use it for everything. You know, I could in one sentence stand up here and say, I love my God. And then I could go home and say, I love ice cream. You know, and like, well, that's certainly different, you know, and like we say love for everything. If we enjoy the day, I say I'm loving the day, you know, and like we just use the word so much. And someone has said when a word can mean anything, it means basically nothing, you know. And so like, what does it mean? And I want to talk a little bit about what it means. There are three important realities about the word love. And that's the word that is used. Appreciate, I'm talking about agape, okay? So the first one is this, is that love is doctrine. Now I say that to say this, that sometimes we separate them, and we do it with good intentions, and I don't mean to like be negative about this, but sometimes we'll say things like, it's important that we have good doctrine, but if we have good doctrine and we don't have love, then the doctrine, and we almost separate them. And I'm like, well, love is doctrine. It's not like you have to have good doctrine and just teach it in a nice way. Love is doctrine. The word doctrine just means teaching, and there's not a subject you're going to find in the New Testament that is taught more often than love. In the upper room scene, right? We have John 13 to 17. This is the passage we're going over for the next couple of months. 32 times Jesus mentions love. This is what we take. Like this is the command, right? A new commandment I give you, that you love one another as I love you. You must love one another. So it's not just something that we add to the doctrine. Love is doctrine. Sometimes I hear people talk about the head versus the heart. And I'm thinking, man, if your head and your heart aren't connected, then your head's not working. The head, you can't separate the two. They go together. You must have love. It is taught. It is doctrine. It is commanded. As much as anything is commanded. As a matter of fact, I think good evidence supports the fact it's the most important doctrine that we as a church have. Which kind of brings me to the next thing, is that love is an Old Testament commandment, and that Old Testament commandment has been fulfilled in Christ. So one of the things, I posted this on Light Post, and I asked you to just think about it a little bit. It's interesting that Jesus says, a new commandment I give you, is that love is a new commandment. It's not a new commandment, right? I mean, Jesus clearly said it's the greatest commandment of the Old Testament. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. Because that's Deuteronomy, you know. It's the old law that says to love God and to love your neighbor. Love has always been commanded. But there is something new about it. And this is what we'll talk about. And that is what Jesus shows about it. Jesus fulfilled it. I don't think the world could know what love truly is without Jesus. You can't. Jesus didn't just command us to love one another. The command is love one another. As I have loved you, you must love one another. There's something just about the word that doesn't do it justice. You have to appreciate Christ in it, or else you'll miss the commandment. Love is manufactured, or love isn't manufactured, it's produced. And what I mean by that is one of the challenges of like even preaching a lesson like this is it's very clear where I could be like, y'all ought to love each other. But it's hard to make yourself just love somebody. You know, like I think it is, without getting into detail about it, like sometimes we say love is not an emotion. And I'm thinking, well, it's entirely an emotion. But there is emotion in it. Because it can be said that love is more than emotion, but it's not less than emotion. You know, I can sit there and tell my wife I love her, but if I'm indifferent about her, you know, I love you, but like my heart isn't like stirred by our relationship, she's not going to feel loved. There is an emotional aspect to love. And it's really hard to just say, love each other. And all of a sudden, like we have like these emotions that are strong and pulled together. Like there's love is, you can't flatten it, right? It's hard to define, and we'll talk about this in a moment. But it is, it's a behavior that is less something you could just do by saying to do it, and it's something that has to be produced. The way I like to think of it is in Galatians chapter 5. Paul talks about the flesh and the spirit. And he talks about like people who give themselves to the flesh, they do what he calls the works of the flesh. It's just doing bad stuff. But then he talks about people who walk by the Spirit. And he doesn't call them the works of the Spirit. He calls it then the fruit of the Spirit. As if my walking in the Spirit produces something within me. It's produce, right? It's like, if you want an apple, like, how do you get an apple? Well, you don't just say, I want an apple. You have to do what is necessary to produce an apple. You go out and you cultivate the ground, right? You dig a hole, you fertilize the, and you stick a seed in there and you water it, and you can't just do that once. You have to attend to it and water it and make sure it's got all the things it needs. Maybe fertilize it again. You have to take care of it. And what happens eventually is something grows up, and eventually you get fruit. But it's a process. It's something you have to do in order to get the fruit. If you want to be somebody who has the love that Jesus wants you to have, you have to do the things that produce the love. I would suggest maybe one of the first things to do is what we talked about last week. Serve each other. Wash feet, And so how do we define it? Well, the reality is the Bible doesn't define agape abstractly. Defines it Christologically. Basically, you can't understand the command if you don't look at Christ. If you're not connected to Him. The more you draw yourself into Christ, the more He draws you to Himself. The closer you are to Christ. Chapter 15, we'll get there in a couple weeks. We'll use the language abiding in Christ. The more we abide in Him, the more we will understand what this command is all about. And so the passage we're going over today, 13:34, says, just as I loved you, you are to love one another. That is to say, if you don't know how Christ loved you, you won't know what you're supposed to do with one another. If you leave Christ out of it and you just try to look at a dictionary, you're not going to get it. You have to look at Christ in order to understand this command. Later in his life, John, who is in the upper room, will write a letter. And in that letter, he will say in 1 John 3:16, by this we know love, that he laid down his life for us. How do I know what it is? He didn't say it's because I looked in the dictionary. I know what love is because I know what Christ did. I look at Christ. I look at Jesus. And the more I know Jesus, the more I know love. The closer I am to Jesus, the more I can do what he did. 1 John 4, verse 10 says, and this is love. Not that we have loved God, but that he loved us and sent his son. The passage goes on to say what God has done for us. But if you don't know what God has done through Jesus and Jesus has done, if you don't look at the father-son relationship, if you don't see what Jesus has done for us, if you don't consider Christ, you won't know the love. You have to look at Christ. You have to abide in him. You have to attach yourself to him in order to appreciate what this command is. Okay, so let's turn to the passage. John 13, 31 through 35. I've broken it into 3 parts, and the first part's about glory, right? Jesus says when he had gone out, now when he had gone out, this is in reference to Judas. Jesus washed the feet of Judas like all the other apostles, and then Judas left. And so now he's got those in the room who are going to be in charge of taking his message, his mission, and spreading it. And he says to them, now the Son of Man is glorified. Now this is important. When Jesus speaks of his glory, he's talking about his death. It's crucifixion, which is odd. And the world doesn't appreciate this because when the world thinks of crucifixion, they think dishonorable, this inglorious thing. But Jesus speaks of his crucifixion as if it's his shining glory. Now the Son of Man is glorified, and God is glorified in him. If God is glorified in him, God will also glorify him in himself and his glory and glorify him at once. And so, it's all about glory, right? Lots of glory in here. And it's about the Son glorifying the Father and the Father glorifying the Son. And I think the best way of understanding this is when it comes to the glory of God, it's not as if Jesus is making God glorious or the Father is making the Son glorious. They are glorious. They've always been glorious. The idea is that the glory of God, it's about his character. It's about who he is. It's his magnificence, his splendor, his beauty, his loveliness. God is magnificent in power and in splendor and wonder. He is. If we just knew God and could see God, it would be too much for us. He's too good. It's why I think Moses, when he saw God, he's like, I have to take the shoes off my feet, right? How do you draw near to a God who is who he is when I recognize who I am? It's this problem that humanity has always had, is that you have God in his beauty and his splendor and his wonder and his magnificence, and then you have humans who at our best, okay, what are we? We're so far from what we are supposed to be. This morning in our Bible class, I'm reflecting on the passage from Romans chapter 8, and I think of Paul wrote Romans, and I think of Paul as this really awesome guy, so devoted. And Paul says, "Oh, I'm a wretched person. I'm wretched. The things I want to do. I know that this is good and I should be doing it, but I find myself not doing the things that I should. And there are things that I don't want to do. I know they're bad, and yet I find myself doing it." It's he's even now, I've got this real struggle within me. He's just wretched. And so how could you be with God, who is so glorious, so magnificent? And I think that humanity has just always struggled to understand the glory of God. And so Jesus isn't saying here, I'm making God glorious. That what I'm about to do is going to make him a glorious being. What he's doing is he's showing the glory. He's letting us see it. That this thing that he's about to do is going to show us the character of God. And by Jesus going to the cross, God is showing the character of Jesus. And it is character unlike what humans have. Just love and goodness and caring and mercy and grace. It's beauty. And Jesus says, the world's about to get a glimpse of it. The world's about to see. And so, as Jesus goes through this, what's going to happen, and he's mentioned this multiple times already, he says, where are we? Little children, yet a little while I'm with you. You seek me, and just as I said to the Jews, so now I say to you, where I'm going, you cannot come. Where is he going? Where he's going to the Father. Passage has told us that many times. He's going to go be with the Father. Why is Jesus able to go be with the Father? It's because the Father's glorious and he's glorious and they can be together. But Peter and James and John, they can't be with the Father. They can't be. Now we're going to talk about this more next week. Jesus is going to say in our passage next week, I go to prepare a place for you. And a lot of times people think that Jesus is going to go arrange heaven. I don't think Jesus is going to arrange heaven. What Jesus is going to do, he's going to go take care of a problem that they have. Right now, as Jesus speaks, there's no way anyone could be with the Father. Not a one. He told the Jews earlier in chapter 8, I go to be with the Father, and you can't come. And they're like, well, why not? And Jesus says, well, I'll tell you what, it's your sin. You're going to die in your sin. And yet to this group, he doesn't say they're going to die in their sin. He's going to go say, I'm going to go make a way. You can't come now. You'll come later. I'll make a way for you to be there. Why would Jesus do it? It's because he's glorious. Like he's going to go do what is necessary to take care of my sin. He's going to go do what is necessary to take care of my filth because the Father is glorious and he's glorious, but he's going to go bear my guilt and my sin upon him so that eventually, while I can't go to be with the Father now, I can go in the future, right? Like I will be able to be there. What Jesus is going to do tomorrow morning, right? What he's going to do is what no one else could do. He's going to make a way for us wretched people to be with the glorious God. But if we're going to be glorious, then we have to learn his way of doing things. And so he says, a new commandment I give you, that you love one another. Just as I have loved you, you also are to love one another. That's what makes God so glorious. 1 John 4:7, God is love. Jesus says, as I have loved you, you must, this behavior, this this character that is consistent with the Father and with the Son. Like if we refuse to follow that behavior and to allow that behavior to be produced inside of us, if we refuse to let God write that in our hearts, right? This new covenant that he's going to write on our hearts, this new law he's going to write, if we don't let him write that on our hearts, if we don't follow his lead and love as he loved, you can't be with him. But Jesus says, this is the command. This is the behavior. This is the character that you must carry with you. And you must teach to others. You must love one another as I have loved you. And he says, by this, all people will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another. A disciple is someone who ultimately becomes like his master. How you can tell who a disciple is you see who he emulates. And so Jesus says, love as I have loved. And the world has now seen the glory of God through the self-sacrificing love for one another. And if you will be that, then the world will say, I've seen that before. I know who he's following. I know who he's learning from. I know who he's emulating. I know who he's becoming like. Jesus. If we want to be a people who are faithful to our covenant, if we want to be a people who show the world who Jesus is, maybe a better way of saying that, if we want to be a people that the world recognizes when they know Jesus, then love will be the defining characteristic. It will be the doctrine that we hold deeply within us, that we love, that we teach, that we practice. It will be the doctrine that isn't just words on a page, but it's etched by God in our hearts. The glory of the Father, the glory of the Son. They want to pass on so that we could be glorious also. But we have to obey the command. Love one another. As I have loved you, you must love one another. If there's anyone in here that needs anything in their walk with God, in their following of Jesus, we would love to help you in any way that we can. If we can study with you further, we would love that opportunity. If we can pray for you, we would love to pray for anyone in here. If there's someone who needs to be baptized, we would love to help you with that as well. If we can help you in any way in your walk with God, I'll be in the back after the service, and there's many others you could reach out to as well. You could do it after service or any time, but let us know, and we would love to study with you, to pray for you, to help you in any way that you can have your relationship strengthened with God. If we could help you in any way, be thinking about these things while we stand and sing the song of invitation.